Greetings, programs, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Awesome Friday podcast. This is our bonus Sundance Film Festival recap, and joining me, Matthew. I'm Matthew. Hi. Today is Rachel Ho, who is basically just on the team now. I don't really feel comfortable calling you a guest anymore, Rachel. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Glad to join the team.
Yeah.
I'm glad that, we already, it feels like a little while ago that I recorded with Simon, but it feels like family. It's like,
I
it's
know,
cool.
right?
Besties.
Yeah.
We're good.
You're just, you're here often enough now that, I think you're just on the team. Like, if we had bios on the website, I would just add your bio, but we don't actually have that. So.
Oh, you should have bios on your website. Why don't you have bios on your website?
Oh, it's mostly because I've been really lazy about the website.
Fair enough.
I mean, there's no joke there. I've been really lazy about the website.
I get it. All my website is me posting links to things that I've done. I don't do anything beyond that. So
yeah. I mean, managing a website is tedious. There's no getting around it, even when you enjoy doing it, which I honestly generally do. But yeah, it's tedious.
You sent me a thing. It was like a game, and I feel like I was like, oh, you enjoy building websites or like building something online. I mean, that's what you do for a living, to be fair.
Oh yeah, I sent you my movie trivia game, didn't I?
Yeah, which I smashed it, by the way. I did really well.
Oh, good.
I don't think I ended up telling you that. I think I just did it and I went, well done, Rachel, and then just moved on.
Yeah. I need to finish and publish that in a bigger way because I think it was a pretty good idea.
It's fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Good. Well, we both attended the Sundance Film Festival. This was my first year attending the Sundance Film Festival. What year is it for you?
Second year. I did it last year, online, obviously. And then, well, not obviously, actually, last year was the year that they thought they were going to be able to go back in person. And then I think literally weeks before, they had to cancel and go back. So this year was the first year they went back in person. I did not go in person. Neither did you. We did not go to Utah this year.
No, we definitely had some. We definitely had some mutuals who went in person. Those jerks.
I enjoyed watching their pictures. Like, it's Thomas went. I think Taylor went. Did he go?
Thomas and Taylor and Marty from their crew as well. All went
with Marty.
And they're just a bunch of jerks for going. And I say that from a place of love and jealousy, not actual resentment, just for clarity's sake.
I have a bit of resentment. I resent them a little bit for being able to go out and having fun in Utah. It's fine, whatever. But I'd love to go though. It looks like a really cool festival to actually be there in person, and it's a cool one because it's got like a good amount of history and stuff like that. I think I'm a bit what's the word? I'm a bit spoiled, I suppose, because I'm in Toronto and because TIFF is here. So I'm always like, well, I have at least one that I know I will always go to in person if they have it in person because I'm right here. And then I don't really think about, well, Thomas, he came to TIFF and he went to Sundance. My guess is if he were able to go to like Cannes and Venice and Berlin, like he would just jump on a plane and do it. But I think in my head, I'm like, well, I got a big one that I can go to, so why am I going to the other one? Which is terrible. I shouldn't think that way.
Yeah, Thomas definitely has the hustle down, and you're right. I think honestly, if the opportunity for him to attend any of the big European festivals came up, I 100% believe he would do that, and I would be jealous the whole time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Here in Vancouver, we have a couple of film festivals. The biggest one being Vancouver International, but it doesn't quite have the prestige level that like the Sundance or TIFF or, I mean, most of the other ones big ones that I've covered have only ever been virtually, like Tribeca and Fantasia and Festival de Nouveau Cinema, which are also out of Montreal. Like, I've covered a lot of festivals over the last few years, and it's always been from the comfort of my home.
Which isn't a bad thing. I'm a big proponent of festivals continuing with a virtual component for press because, well, actually, not just for press. I think for everybody. Why not? Like, why not? allow people who live in faraway places who might not have the money because it's expensive. Geez, I like looked up flights to go to Utah and then like accommodation. It was really like, it wasn't cheap to do all that. So I think it would be nice if everybody could keep it going, but it does seem like they're trying to push towards everyone going back to in person, which is
Yeah,
unfortunate.
I know some of the regional controls because I spoke with a couple years ago. I spoke with Curtis Bulishuk, who's the basically the guy at VIF. He's I think his title
Hmm.
is associate programmer or something, but he's like the guy in charge of programming. And I was like, why is it that like people outside of BC can't watch VIF
Yeah, it's weird,
virtually?
isn't it? Yeah.
And the answer is actually pretty much a business decision.
Hmm.
It's because if you can watch a movie online at VIF in September and you live in Calgary, you might not go to SIF.
Yeah, it's
And
true. And I mean, like
that's it. And that's the whole thing. They just want
and
to
I
create that attraction that like a movie that plays at Sundance that like
mhm.
regular Canadians can't watch. When that film eventually comes to their local film festival, they will go to their local film festival.
I like regular Canadians. It's just
Yes,
the normie
the
Canadians over
normies. Yes,
there, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, because I remember seeing there was it the St. John's Festival, like one of the maritime those guys over out east.
yeah.
Um, they had the same thing, and I remember seeing like they bubble them though, just as during COVID they were bubbled, but they say like you can't watch it outside the maritime provinces, and I was like, oh, that's kind of surprising, but I do get that. Like, it does make sense because there's only so many movies to go around every year. So, yeah, why not? Just especially when it comes to okay, between Calgary and Edmonton, how do they do it then? Do
Oh, I
they
have no
can't?
idea.
I wonder if they you can't geo block to within Alberta. That's kind of nuts. But then they would just cannibalize each other, basically.
I
Interesting.
think
I'm
I'm
gonna
not
look that
100.
up later. That's
I'm not
fascinating.
100% sure, but I think the way that Edmonton and Calgary do it is I think that they're at different times.
But then
But I'm
whoever
not.
goes first has a clear advantage, unless they work together to be like, we're going to parse out the movies. Because I don't think their festivals are as long as a VIF or a TIFF. I think theirs are
No, and I
just a
think
little bit shorter.
and there's definitely films that premiere later in the year. So like if one is
Yeah.
early in the year and one is late, then they would have a different selection too. But yeah, the short answer to all of this is basically that it's always festivals are great celebrations of the arts and
Hmm.
also business ventures that need to make money. So the answer is to quote Stanley Hudson from The Office, money. The answer is money.
In a way, though, it's kind of like a very nice Canadian politeness too, of being like, we are going to just only you guys have this, we have that, and like it's actually kind of polite the way that they do it because VIF could just be like, you know what, we don't really care, like let's just do, and then everyone can come through and watch
Yeah.
whatever, like and they could just do it that way. Like what is it, Cinefest Sudbury in
Yeah.
Ontario, like they go right after TIFF. Like they're literally days after TIFF they start their programming, and they carry a decent amount of TIFF movies, but
Hmm.
they're Ontario only. So it's like if they had just said we're just going to do the country, then and it's online, then the
Yep.
entire country is kind of screwed. So actually, I'm not going to say it's. I'm going to go the other way. It's not money grubbing. I'm going to say it's polite Canadian. It's just saying there's room for
Those
everybody, you guys. Room for all of us.
those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
That's true. I'm sure. I feel like when Rogers and Bell and those guys meet, and like all the big banks when they meet together, they're like, "We're just being really polite
Oh
Canadians.
yeah.
Like, we're just helping each other, and
We're
we're
making
hurting
tons of
each
money in the name of politeness.
other."
Yeah.
I
You know.
hate that. I was just talking to a friend about all of these. We're not gonna get into that because it's nothing to do with movies. But I was just really annoyed that like Canada's run by like what, 5 families.
I mean, yeah, we're a country of oligopolies. It's a real
Yeah.
discussion that is beyond the scope of this podcast for sure. But it's definitely a thing.
It is made for a very
Um,
interesting dinner conversation.
so this was my first Sundance. I applied for accreditation last year, and they were like, "Sorry, no, but apply next year." And then this year, they emailed me and they were like, "Hey, just want to give you a heads up. Accreditation's coming up, and if you wanted to apply, we would be receptive to that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I applied and I got in. And this is your second, so my
Sorry,
yeah,
before you continue, if they
yeah.
hadn't emailed you, would you have applied anyways?
So I have a lot of personal life stuff going on right now, and
Yeah.
I don't actually know that I would have. I've been
Interesting.
having to make a lot of interesting choices in my life the last couple of weeks. But what I settled on was I set a pretty strict limit of how many films I was going to be able to watch to sort of like balance things out
Right. Fair enough.
between because this honestly like film festivals are a thing that I used to just like for VIF every year. I used to just take 2 weeks of holiday and just watch all the movies. And I could very easily have done that this time too, but I have other things I need to be taken care of. So I just set a limit that I would see, six or seven films, a hard limit of 6 or 7, and that's what I did. And honestly, if they hadn't emailed me, I was sort of on the fence. But as soon as they were like, "Hey, we just want to let you know that accreditation's coming
Yeah.
up," I was like, "Okay, you're not exactly inviting me, but it's interesting that you're letting me know, so I'm going to apply."
It's the Lloyd
Person,
Christmas. So you're telling me there's a chance?
yeah, pretty much, because it wasn't like a group email either. Like a publicist email
No,
from
yeah.
Sundance emailed me to be like, "Hey, like accreditation's coming up."
I mean, not to make you feel unspecial, but yeah, I got the same email being like,
Yeah,
"Hey, just to let you know." So yeah,
and yeah, I'm
so
sure I'm
hopefully
not the
they
only
push
one.
things into it. Yeah.
I am the smallest fish in our particular barrel. Don't get me wrong, but it felt nice that they invited me, and then I was like, okay, fine, I will apply. And then I did, thinking they're probably going to say no. And then when I got in, I was like, oh, I guess I'm going. Guess I'm watching Sundance. So yeah, it was all very just very nice. Actually, I very much enjoyed the process, and then it was super interesting seeing like all of our people that I know and I'm sure you know as well being like, I got into Sundance, and then people who are like, I didn't get into Sundance,
Yeah,
and me
that was
being
messed
like,
up.
how did I get in and you didn't get in? But anyway, it's definitely
The
some people with larger audiences than me definitely didn't make it. So I find
I
that very
think,
interesting.
I mean, I don't want to. To be clear, I do not speak from any internal knowledge at Sundance or anything like that. But my guess is like I think that they like to diversify who they're giving access to, like bigger people, smaller people, yada yada yada. But the thing I found interesting was people saying when the wave of people on Twitter being like, "Oh, like looks like I'm going to Sundance this year," and then a bunch of people being like, "Oh, I didn't hear anything. I guess I'm not going." Then 2 weeks later, they're like, "Oh, I guess I am going because
Hmm.
Sundance just emailed me." And because one of my colleagues over at that shelf, she was like saying, "I guess I didn't get in," because a bunch of us were like, "Yeah, I'm covering," and she goes, "I guess I didn't get it," and I go, "Just wait, you might get it," because I've seen other people getting it delayed. And then sure enough,
Yeah.
2 weeks later, she's like, "Right, I just got an email. I'm in." I'm like, it's so weird. It's very strange the way that they did that.
Yeah, that was me too, actually. The first round of people who got in, I was like, I like had no expectations. So when I saw a bunch of our mutuals be like, "I'm going to Sundance," I was like, "I
Yeah.
haven't heard anything, but no news is good news. It's not a no. It's not
Yeah.
yet a no. So I'm just gonna not worry about it."
It's
And
just it's
yeah,
such a strange way to do it though.
2 or 3 weeks later, I got the email, and yeah, and I'm happy I did. I saw a number of good films, and it's just nice to see good films early in the year, which is
Yeah.
kind of a terrible way to frame that, but there's
Well,
good
that's like
films all year long.
Sundance's thing though, isn't it? Sundance's thing is being the kickoff to what is going to come for the year, and hopefully it's good stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes it's not,
exactly.
but yeah, hopefully there's like a pile of good movies.
Yeah, and I also like that, uh, TIFF is obviously one where there's a lot of big premieres,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
VIF is one where, like, here in Vancouver, there's not usually there's usually a few like Canadian world premieres,
Yeah.
but most of the rest of the premieres are like North American premieres or Canadian premieres of stuff that has done well or maybe not well elsewhere. So it's also nice to just be. I find it really interesting to be at a festival like this one, or the other big one that I some cover most years now is Tribeca, which does have a lot of world premieres, and you just have like
Yeah.
no idea what you're about to watch. And I find that really refreshing as a person who, most of the time has a pretty good idea what the movies are going to be going in because there's buzz one way or the other. So I really enjoy. I really enjoyed Sundance because I literally had no idea about any of the films I was going to watch before I watched them.
Yeah,
Except
true.
except maybe Infinity Pool, which people were already talking about before it was even out because it just looked fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, that one was weird because it literally had its theatrical release on Friday. Like, it came out in the middle of Sundance, or I'm sorry, right at the end of Sundance, I suppose. But
Well, and even
usually the
its Sundance premiere was like the Tuesday, and then it came out for the world
yeah,
on Friday. Like it was a very
yeah,
short window.
because usually a theatrical release will be months down the line. But Brandon Cronenberg had already secured Neon for his distribution, so I guess they
Hmm.
were going for the January. But yeah, it kind of made for a bit of a strange, like, is this? It's kind of part of Sundance, but it's also just its actual release.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that was the only one that some people had already talked about, or like American press might have seen it last week.
Hmm.
Um, to get ready for the junkets and things like that. So there was a little bit, but everything else, yeah, you kind of had to guess, which is an interesting exercise to do when you're trying to pick like things that you think might be a big hit later down the line, which is a terrible game to try to play. But uh, yeah, because you don't normally, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's also more difficult to make those guesses at a festival like Sundance, where
Yeah.
90% of it is super indie and
Yeah.
doesn't have a huge like at the TIFFs and the Venices and the Berlinales of the world. Big movies with huge names are debuting, and so you
Yeah.
can kind of be like, "Oh, I recognize all these names. That'll probably be up my street." Whereas at Sundance, or even again like Tribeca or something like Fantasia, like not necessarily the case.
But it's interesting though because you say that it's like last year, I'd say, was that movie Fresh came out at Sundance last year,
Hmm.
and I remember watching it and thinking this is going to be a huge movie because it's Sebastian Stan, it's Stacey Edgar Jones. It's a great movie. Also, I was like, this is going to get a lot of buzz. And then we talked about it when I was on with you and Simon afterwards. Like, it just nothing happened with it, and that was simply because they shafted it to Hulu, and
Yeah.
nothing really came from it. And you're like, God, that's so disappointing because that should have been such a big movie. And then
Yep.
you have other movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once debuted at South by Southwest last year. Like that's where it came out. And I kind of assumed it was going to be a big movie for at least my peoples, but I didn't know if it was because it's a weird movie. Who knew that it was going to blow up the way that it did? And then you say something like Fantasia, that movie Skinamarink
Hmm.
just went bananas, and that came out at Fantasia. So sometimes it happens. Very few and far between it happens, but like it's kind of nice when it does. And like Skinamarink was one that I watched it and it freaked me out. And then it's made over, I think it's made like 1.5 million now at the box office, which is
Oh,
crazy.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, definitely films from any festival can blow up. But if you had told me, if you told like the average moviegoer that like, oh yeah, the guys who made the Harry Potter farting corpse movie had made a new movie with Michelle Yeoh, I don't think that's going to have as big of a splash with people who aren't
Yeah.
paying attention like you and I do. So like it's
I saw
the
an
prediction
interview
is
with
not there.
them. It's not there. No, I saw an interview with them and they were just kind of like, we are as surprised as anybody else that this movie is like in awards contention. Like they thought we made a movie that we liked, but their movies are weird, like that's kind of their thing. And then they were saying like if we thought we were trying to aim for an awards contender, like we wouldn't have included a movie with like butt plugs in it. Like that's just not what we would have done. And
Yeah,
it's so true. Like if they were actually looking to do Oscar bait movies, like they wouldn't have made Everything Everywhere All at Once. Surely not that movie. But yeah, you just never know. And like I said, like Fresh was a movie I genuinely thought that that would be such a huge hit, and just
yeah.
nothing came of it.
It is so tough to predict just because I feel like anything that goes straight to streaming,
Yeah,
and Netflix is probably I would say the biggest offender
yeah,
in this way. Just maybe just because they're the biggest target still, but like they debut a movie and it's popular for a weekend, and then the algorithm just buries it, and like
yeah,
it's not like there's not like posters everywhere. I mean, even Apple TV Plus does a better job of like there were I don't know about Toronto, but there were Spirited posters all over this city for
really.
weeks ahead of time and for weeks after it came out. You
That's
never see that
interesting.
for Netflix. All they care
No,
about is that first weekend.
but Apple also like comes out with like commercial, like they just like the Timmy Chalamet just did one, and then Somebody else did one with Apple. I can't remember, but Apple's quite. I mean, they're Apple, right? So they're quite good with their marketing. Like, it doesn't surprise me as much. It surprises me more that Netflix is so bad at marketing than it is that Apple is good at marketing. Because Netflix at this
That's
point
fair.
should probably learn their thing. But I was gonna say, Fresh was um the other one from last year was Good Luck, Good Luck Leo Grand, or Good Luck to You Leo Grand,
Yep.
and that was an Emma Thompson movie, and she
Straight to
was
Amazon.
amazing in that. So I think that was another Hulu one. It just went straight to Hulu, and I was like, "What's Hulu
Oh,
doing? Like, what's
it's
their problem?" Because it was a
it's
switch
Amazon
dates.
Prime here in Canada.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know.
interesting.
Oh,
Well, so it's interesting because since before Disney bought Fox, their film rights were mostly going to Amazon Prime in Canada, and I think that that
right,
deal
yeah.
basically hasn't expired. So
So there's
anything that
still some
they've,
things that were getting caught underneath it.
yeah, basically. So like, yeah, Good Luck to You, Leo Grand is on Amazon Prime here in Canada, but and that one with was it last year or the year before, like with Lupita Nyong'o, where she's a school teacher and all the children become zombies. That was a Hulu original in the States, and it was an Amazon Prime movie here. And it was an Amazon Prime movie like 3 months later up here too. Like we got a delayed release.
Yeah, and like both those movies though, I thought were great. And
Yeah,
I know Emma Thompson got nominated for a Golden Globe, but if they had put that out in theaters, I actually think she would have gotten more talk for awards and things like that. I don't think Fresh necessarily would have been an awards contender, but like I think it could have made a good amount of money in theaters, and people would have talked about it a lot.
I think
So
it definitely would have been like a genre favorite.
yeah, and
Um,
Sebastian Stan, like people love the guy, so I don't know.
they do, they really do.
Although I've been seeing
Um,
some backlash on him recently because of Pam and Tommy. People aren't really feeling him the way that he was like doing the publicity for Pam and Tommy. Apparently, I don't know.
I haven't
I
seen
might have
that,
just
but I'm
stumbled
not.
upon like one tweet and been like, "Why are you guys going after Sebastian Stan? Leave him alone. I
I
like
don't
him."
know. I don't. I went. I looked on Twitter this morning, and all I saw that was that Zachary Levi was trending. So I assume that people are finding out that he's a piece of crap finally.
From what I've gathered, it is a anti-vax situation. I think he must have made some comment about vaccines or something like that. So a lot of
Probably.
people are like, you need to, whatever energy you took going. I saw somebody say like, whatever energy you guys had towards Letitia Wright for Black Panther, keep that up for Zachary Levi. I don't
Yeah.
actually know what he said though. To be honest, I have no idea
I
what he
haven't looked it
said.
up.
But
I don't want to look it up. I don't want to look it
no,
up.
me neither.
So
I didn't care that much about Shazam, so whatever.
I just I remember I don't listen to Joe Rogan because I think his show is bad and I think he's a bad person. But I do remember seeing a clip of Zachary Levi on that show praising a certain fucking Canadian
Ah,
famous
say no more.
psychologist
Say
as
no
like a
more.
deep thinker, and I was like, I don't want to like. I think Shazam is a really fun, great family action movie, and I do not want to. I'm it's disappointing because I do. I'm actually really looking forward to Shazam, but I don't really want to watch Zachary Levi anymore. So
You know, I never watched the first Shazam.
it's a
Didn't.
good movie. It's a
I
good.
heard it was good. Like, yeah, I
It's
heard it was one of the
probably
better DC ones. Yeah.
it's honestly probably my favorite of the DC movies.
Really?
As they
Oh
like,
wow.
it's like that and Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, and like Aquaman are like one, two, three. Um,
I think I'm still very partial to Man of Steel. I have to say, I really enjoyed
I am
Man of
Man of
Steel.
Steel's up there too. I don't.
I really enjoyed Man
We
of
will
Steel.
like we've already been talking for like 25 minutes before we even talked about any Sundance films. But I will say that on the record that I think Man of Steel is a good movie, but a bad Superman story. Um, but that's just
Okay.
a whole debate for
Yeah, we
another
don't need to go
time,
down that road. Yeah,
and
but
I don't
interesting.
need to incur the wrath of DC fans online. So, but
Snyder fans,
that's
particularly. That's a
oh
whole
yeah,
other
jeez,
thing. It's not DC fans; it's Snyder fans.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, we should probably talk about some Sundance movies now that we've talked about the business of film festivals and everything except for films at those festivals. Um, well, that's just what happens when like-minded people get together.
It's
So
true.
let's dive in. I think let's talk about let's each do one that the other didn't see first, and we'll talk about the few that we did overlap with after. So why don't we start? You saw the Michael J. Fox documentary. Tell me about that.
Yes. So it's called Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, which I don't know why I found it such a funny title that they did that. Um, it is okay, I'll say first off, it's a great portrait of Michael J. Fox. And for anybody who, watch Back to the Future, liked it, if you're, slightly older than me and you watch Family Ties growing up and things like that, it's a great, great look at his life. And the thing I like about it is like they look back on obviously how he came up and just a small kid from Vancouver, from Burnaby, sorry, not Vancouver, he's from Burnaby.
Greater
He was
Vancouver.
born in Edmonton and then was raised out in Burnaby, and then it just shows like his ascent into Hollywood and this and that. But then throughout the whole thing, there are also kind of intercutting scenes of him doing physical training and verbal uh, exercises or like coaching, I suppose, to help manage his Parkinson's symptoms. So it's very much like you're looking at the young guy and all the potential and all the spirit and everything, and then they aren't afraid to show what he's been going through and like mentally, physically, everything like that. And it's a really, really well done celebrity documentary in that sense. Like they just showed everything, and he was very candid about what his life was like after he got the diagnosis, and that you know he was drinking and he was quite depressed. I mean, I think anybody could sympathize with the fact that he was dealt a very, very tough hand in life at a very young age as well.
Hmm.
um and so he was very open about talking about that. He was also open just about talking, when he first got to Hollywood and just kind of was becoming a bit of a punk, and he fully recognizes that and things like that. So that was an interesting thing in terms of just it being a celebrity documentary. But the other thing I would say, the reason I like it so much is it is an excellent just documentary. Like the way that they did it was in like sometimes I always associate with A&E documentaries from back when I was a kid. They do
Hmm.
those really cheesy reenactments and you're just like, "Oh my god." Like I that is the biggest turn off any documentary can do for me is reenact a scene. I'm like, "Stop it." Like this is just so lame and cheesy. But what they did with his was they find someone who's kind of a similar shape and body type to how he was when he was younger, and they don't ever show the faces,
Hmm.
but then they cut it with his stuff from Family Ties or from Back to the Future or Teen Wolf. Like they actually use scenes from those shows that relate exactly to what he's going through in real life. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you watch it, it's like you'll get what I mean. And it's fascinating because when you have a sitcom like Family Ties, it's like that Alex P. Keaton character goes through everything that Michael J. Fox went through, basically. Or like they can find a clip that somehow relates to what he was actually going through. And then it's very helpful that he met his wife on Family Ties. So it's just an amazing work of document. What's the word? Is it documentarianship? No, that's not a word. Documentation. Yeah,
Documentarianism.
it's a
Yeah.
well-made documentary is what I'm trying to say. And it's really interesting the way that the editing is, and there's a really cool scene when they shift from him acting as Alex P. Keaton or being Alex Keaton, and then they go into being Marty McFly, and they're like he's walking through like trailers on set, and they're like taking the tweed coat off and putting the red vest on, and it's very cool. But yeah, I would highly recommend it for whenever it comes out. It's going to be on Apple whenever it does get released. It's so good. Like it's a good Michael J. Fox story, and the way they tell his story is brilliant. But it's more if you're interested in like how documentaries get made and like good ones and bad ones. There are just so many celebrity documentaries out there now, and biopics as well, like the fictionalized versions of them. This is a
Hmm.
really, really good version of that.
Hmm. Yeah, I was actually really interested to see it, but I couldn't fit it into my schedule.
They show
Which,
old Canadian money too, which is interesting. Like old Canadian money, which is
what,
really
like
cool.
$1 and $2 bills?
Yeah, like the old one, or obviously the old one, but like the old $2, not the brown $2, like the old $2. It's cool.
Oh, cool. I haven't seen one of those since they stopped, doing that.
Yeah.
I am old. Anyway, Yeah, I really wanted to see it, but I couldn't fit it into my schedule, and I know that Apple had picked it up, which is actually at this point interesting. I think Apple picking something up is a pretty big vote of confidence for me because they have a pretty high hit rate on
Yeah,
TV
they've
and
done really
movies.
well.
Um, which is kind of the least surprising thing, right? Like that's the Apple way. They don't, you know, they innovate in that they often put out the best version of things, not necessarily the first, but they're they have a concise vision of what they want to do. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. Um, and I've always been a fan of Michael J. Fox because I was a kid in the '80s, so
Yeah.
I've seen all this stuff, and it was one of those, I don't get caught up in celebrity stuff all that frequently, but I remember being pretty devastated when I heard that he had Parkinson's.
That was very
So
sad. That was because I one thing that they talked about, and I guess I never thought about it, was just like Parkinson's. It's an old person ailment usually. Like to
yep,
get it as young as he was a very. I mean, it's unfortunate for anybody to get it, but it's especially unfair when you are that young to get Parkinson's. I don't care if you're an actor, a singer, or just Joe Schmo on the street. Like to get Parkinson's at that age is that's a really tough hand.
yeah, yeah. Someone who has had a family member who had Parkinson's, I can attest to that. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But I'm glad the movie's good because I'm very much looking forward to seeing it whenever. I was just trying to look up when Apple's releasing it, but I can't.
I don't think they've put a date on it
They
yet.
haven't put a date on it yet. And if you try and search for it on Wikipedia, it just goes back to his page. So interesting. um, yeah. So I think that is definitely one to watch out for. I will say that the one I wanted to talk about as my one that you didn't see, um, which I think people will be talking about this year, is Fair Play. Um, Fair Play. Let me just look up her name because I can. It's the girl from Bridgerton, Phoebe. Uh,
Oh, Waller.
no, no. Um,
Who's that?
Phoebe Dynevor
Oh, I was like, who's
plays.
Phoebe Waller Bridge?
Yeah, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. No, Phoebe Dynevor and Alden Ehrenreich play a pair of investment analysts at a very prestigious investment firm in New York City. And at the start of the film, they are, I think the best way to put it would be crazy in lust, um, and in love. And they're living together. And they're both analysts on the same floor in the same firm. And right at the beginning of the film, a senior person, a project manager, gets fired, and then for a few minutes there's speculation as to who is going to replace this PM. And a rumor goes around that her character hears and says to him, "It's going to be you. You're the one who's going to get promoted." And they celebrate because they think he's going to get promoted. And then in basically the next scene, she's the one that gets promoted. And the rest of the movie just follows the relationship between this very capable woman and the mediocre man that she has basically hitched her wagon to. Um, and I think it's going to piss off a lot of people. Um, but it is really, really well acted. And I mean, there's probably some debate you can have about parts of the script, but all of it feels very true, and the ending is great. And I really don't want to spoil too much of it, but like the film does a really good job in its first like 15 minutes, 20 minutes of establishing them both as being actually quite competent, actually loving what they do. And then once she's promoted, it does a very good job of very subtly and also not so subtly making you realize that actually no, she's very capable and he's just sort of average at best. um and the like gender politics and relationship dynamics that take place now that she's sort of on the rise and he's very clearly not are really well thought out, really well performed. and I really can't wait for people to see this. It's going to be on Netflix, so I can't wait for the 3-day weekend when we all talk about it and then forget about it. But I'm looking forward to that day. Because again, I think it's gonna. This is the kind of movie where you look at reviews for it and you see a lot of women being like, "Yep," and you see a lot of men being like, "Oh," and a lot of men being like, and a lot of men being like, "I don't see the value in this," and being like, kind of maybe telling on yourself a little bit. You know? um, but I was riveted for the whole movie. It's easily my favorite movie that I saw at the festival.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know what Fair Play. I remember everyone was talking about it, and you did mention it to me, and I tried to get it, but I was too late. But that actually sounds fascinating, and something that when you're hearing, I'm just like, oh yeah, yeah, I've been through that. I think everyone's been. Most women I know have been through some form of that, and also takes to what my friend I was having dinner with last night. We actually brought this kind of similar topic up, where I was like, I would never date somebody who's in the same field as me for a very specific reason, and that's that reason basically. Oh, that's fascinating. I can't wait to watch that then. Netflix got it, eh? That's pretty decent.
Yeah, it's even like I think it's a Netflix original. Even it's all
Oh.
all the production logos are Netflix, but it's also just a really good reminder. So like the story here, honestly, is going to be Phoebe Dynevor.
Mm-hmm.
She is fantastic, and I haven't really seen her in too much stuff. I know she made a big splash on Bridgerton, playing I think the youngest of the daughters in that show. But also though, like it's a really good reminder that Alden Ehrenreich is a great actor. I know that like he seems to have stalled out a little bit after Solo. Like I can't remember,
Yeah.
has he like I know he's done
Not
stuff, but like
really.
nothing really big.
Nothing of
Um,
note.
but this year he has this coming out, and also Cocaine Bear. And I really hope that this is kind of like a bit of a career resurgence for him because he's playing this character, this very cocky but ultimately very mediocre man. He's so good. He's so good at skirting that line of like just the unearned confidence of the middle class white guy, and
I
it's
love that.
he's really good.
I'm gonna put it out there, like, and I'm just saying this is without having seen that movie, but this one sounds like a more similar to. I keep bringing up Fresh for some reason. I don't know why I keep doing that. But it's similar to the way Fresh is in that it's like it's talking about gender dynamics and gender politics in a very different way, in like a more nuanced, a more modern way. And when I say modern, I just mean not 5 years ago, even though 5 years ago is not that long ago. And that was the biggest problem I had with movies like She Said and uh Women Talking, even, which I
Hmm.
felt like those movies. Now She Said is it's about a historical moment or whatever. Like I get where they're, and that's, you know, I understand what the context of that film is, but both of those movies to me were just raising up issues that I'm like, yeah, we talked about these things endlessly in 2015, and it's now
Hmm.
2022, and the world has moved on quite a bit, and I think that we need to kind of up our game in terms of what we're talking about when it comes to gender dynamics. So this movie kind of sounds like it fits into that same category of a bit, you know, it's almost talking about the same stuff that we've been talking about for decades now, but like in a bit of a different way, in a bit more of a modern context. So I'm really looking forward to that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I would say with this movie, none of which I'm going to here because I think you should just watch it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the way that she ultimately the way the movie recognizes her is like or her character is written as to be like the more competent person, and then um I mean everything I want to say right now is a spoiler, so I don't actually want to say it. But yeah, the way it's all handled is like, yep, yep, that feels very true.
Yeah.
I bet lots of people are going to connect with this one in a really personal way.
Interesting.
uh and it's going to be an interesting one to talk about. But again, if nothing else, the two leads and are great. And Eddie Marsan is in this, and he like no movie with Eddie Marsan can be all bad. It's
Yeah.
just like a law of the universe. Um, so yeah, it's I really. I was riveted again, riveted the whole movie. So yeah,
Awesome.
very much looking forward to it. Yeah. Well, those are the two that we each only saw. What should we start with? Let's start with um, one that I think we were both kind of lukewarm on that we both saw. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the Pod Generation,
The
which
movie
we
that
both
I
saw?
declared should have been a '90s sitcom because I think it would have been brilliant as a '90s sitcom. Um,
Interesting.
so this is Chiwetel Ejiofor and Amelia. Is it
Clark.
Amelia Clark or Emily Clark?
It's Amelia Clark.
Amelia. Yeah,
Yeah.
Amelia Clark. I don't know why I just blanked there. But this is set in a future, near future, and it kind of reminds me a bit of Swan Song. I don't know if you've watched that with Mahershala Ali,
I didn't
also an
actually.
Apple. That's a great movie. So it's kind of that it's in the near future, but yet there's still plenty of things in our current world that are in there, but mm, futuristic in its own way.
Yeah.
And basically, at this point, it has become that women don't need to carry a child. They don't need to actually become pregnant. You can get pods, like literal plastic eggs, and you can grow your baby in there, and you can care for them and uh, watch them grow, and then have them give birth and da da da, da and all this kind of stuff. So in the film, you have Amelia Clark who is all for this at the beginning, and she, is kind of seeing the light of why this is so great, specifically for women, that you don't have to go through, the arduous physicality, the mental hardship of being pregnant. And then also it doesn't take you away from your job and so on and so forth. Whereas her husband, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, he's like a not a botanist, but he is a biology professor, and he's very much so into the idea of nature and that we should, as a society, stop taking things and turning them into technology like holograms all over the place. That we should just embrace natural things, like So it's basically the world has now come that there's no more real trees anymore. They're very few and far between, like real plants. And so the film just kind of plays out like that. That the two of them get pregnant via a pod, and you see them kind of ebb and flow and change perspectives as their baby is growing inside the pod. And I genuinely believe this could have been a very funny 90s-esque sitcom, but also still delivering on the points, like the themes that it is trying to deliver on. But as it is, it's an all right movie. Could have been a better 90s sitcom.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say that if it was going to be anything, it would be about 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes shorter, and be in the middle of whatever the next run of Black Mirror is, and it would have fit in
Oh
just
yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. Could have been part of that. Yeah.
You know,
It does go on a bit too long. Like I don't. It just doesn't have the legs to sustain. But I think actually the funny thing is I think it does have the legs. Like there is a lot to talk about in that movie, in that reality that they've created, and there's a lot to talk about in the circumstances that they've written in there. But they just kind of
yeah,
don't go far enough in a way.
yeah, it's interesting in that like all the pieces are there for it to be legitimately great, and it's just
Hmm.
kind of fine.
Yeah, which
Um,
is unfortunate. It's the worst kind of movie that you can see that they have good bones, but it just doesn't
yeah,
materialize.
it's very very frustrating, and I mean, the world they present. I will say that the movie's almost entire worth watching just because of the world that they've created, which I think at one point is called out in the film as being the 22nd century, like the next century, like
Yeah, yeah, they talk about like
early
our
twenty one
children.
hundreds.
Yeah, they're like our children are going. We want them to succeed in the 22nd century. I think that's what they're.
Yeah, so it's like the late 20, it's like the 2090s or the early 2100s or whatever.
Hmm.
But the world they've created is, I think, very fascinating. Like the production
Yeah,
design in this movie is sort of like off the charts good. Um, it's such because it's not only is it just aesthetically really interesting, but it's also like just depressingly plausible. Everything,
awesome.
everything from the pod itself to the fact that like Amelia Clark's character is constantly going to an air bar where she just breathes fresh air out of a
But
jar that has plants in
people
it.
do that now though. Like people go to things and get like extra oxygen or something like that. Like that's actually a thing. Like
Yeah,
oxygen bars are a thing. It's
that's
ridiculous.
what I'm saying. It's depressingly plausible.
Yeah.
It's and just that like no one goes to the country anymore because everything you eat in the
Mhm.
city. Like it's also just the like the like logical furthest conclusion of capitalism. Um,
Also, the therapists, which I found just so amusing that like they don't have human therapists anymore, that they just have this AI robot thing because they're like, well, this thing can research everything. Like you don't need a person.
oh,
And it's just this like
honestly,
eyeball staring at them.
I didn't necessarily want to talk about it too much, but like, am I the only one? I feel like I'm the only one who's old enough to remember. So they go to this therapist in the movie, which is a giant eyeball on the wall that's like wreathed in like depending on when they go, it's wreathed in like foliage or whatever. But it's just a
Yeah.
big screen with an eyeball, and the therapist is called Eliza, and Eliza was an artificial intelligence therapist that was originally programmed in the 60s. Like
Oh, I didn't
it's
know
literally a
that.
program that like we I had Eliza on a computer in the 80s. Like and the way
Oh
Eliza talks in this
wow.
movie is literally just like like the Eliza that I remember. Like
What
it's
a
such an
wow.
amazing deep cut and
Yeah.
also just hilarious that it hasn't really changed cuz like the prompts that Eliza
Wow.
has in the movie where she's like how does this make you like the way she like parrots
Yeah.
back things to them. They're like, had to do this. And she's like, and how did this make you feel? Like, is just Eliza. It's not even updated. It's just Eliza from the 60s. Um,
That's
and
so funny.
I was talking with a group of people. I'm on a group chat with a bunch of Sundance people. And I remember people talking about how the therapist was so interesting. And I'm like, am I the oldest one here?
That's so funny.
Because like
But okay, let's stop. You're not from the '60s though. It's not like you were
no, no,
born in.
we had Eliza on. Um, we had a Mac Plus when I was in elementary school, and we had Eliza on it, and
Oh,
that was like the mid
fancy.
'80s. So yeah, like Eliza's been around a while. Is all I'm saying,
That's really
and
funny.
it's really funny that like I found it personally very hilarious that Eliza was in this movie, and again in a basically not updated way. Like the way Eliza talks in the movie is the way Eliza has always talked.
What a great pull though from like the director, the screenwriter, whoever did that. What a great
Yeah,
like you said, like what a good deep cut to throw in there. Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
I wanted to like this movie a lot. Like, and you can and like we should mention you and I both said this before that Amelia Clark and Chiwetel Ejiofor are adorable together. They have such a great chemistry. I
Yeah,
could watch them do like a fun rom com, a little comedy thing between the two of them because they're very very good together. Um, and I genuinely like these kinds of sci-fi movies that kind of imagine. Swan Song is the perfect example of a movie similar-ish to this, um, but not at the same time. It's but I generally speaking enjoy these kinds of movies, but yeah, this one just felt a bit flat towards the end, especially the ending. I was telling this is how we end it. Okay.
yeah. It does just kind of stop.
Yeah,
Um,
but
uh, and like I sort of get how they got to that ending, but it does just kind of stop.
mhm.
And like I say, that it's maybe a little frustrating because again, all the pieces are there. All the pieces are
Yeah.
there for it to be great, and it's just kind of fine. And I think that I don't know, maybe they just blew the budget on the production design, but they it just maybe it needed another pass for the script to find something maybe a little deeper. Like it is a very
Yes, I
shallow
agree.
examination of the things that it's trying to examine. That being said, I don't think it's not worth watching. Like it's worth watching
It's
again just
interesting
for the
concept.
production
Yeah.
design, for the
Yeah.
concept. But again, like if it was maybe like an hour to an hour and 15 in an episode of Black Mirror, it might have been better.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good that was probably better than my '90s sitcom thing. I
And
was just
honestly,
it just
like
had so many moments where I'm like, this could be in a sitcom, and it's very funny to me. But yeah, I
yeah, I
think a Black
mean,
Mirror episode makes more sense.
I think another way to put this would be that like because the premise is kind of absurd, like
Yeah.
the idea of gestating a baby outside of the body is so absurd. Although again, just
But
frighteningly
that's
plausible.
Yeah, I was gonna say
But
it's not that absurd though, is it? Like it's not crazy absurd.
it's one of those things that even when it eventually does happen, it'll still be absurd, right? Like why? But I guess what I'm trying to say though is that like because the premise is so absurd, I feel like the movie either needed to be like 20% like lean into it 20% more or lean out of it 20% more. Like it was in that weird
Okay,
place
yeah.
where it was like not it was a little bit too weird, but it also was just
Yeah.
not weird enough, like it hit that middle ground where it was.
Yeah.
And again, like I said before, it's a slightly shallow examination of these things. Like if it had been a little further into the satire or a little further out of it, it would have been a better film.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think if they went super funny with it and showed the absurdity of it through humor,
Yeah.
my 90s sitcom idea, I
Yeah.
think it could have been really funny. Um I know I keep bringing up Swan Song, but like if it had gone a bit more serious like Swan Song is, then I think you could have had something interesting.
Yeah.
Go
But
watch
it's
Swan Song as well because I
But
think
it's
it's
also
really
just
funny.
hard to be serious when you have Chiwetel Ejiofor like wearing a pod on his front and like caressing it and like the most
Yeah.
interesting part of the movie to me, maybe not the most interesting, but one of the most interesting parts of the movie is just like Chiwetel's character like connecting with the pod.
Yeah. That
uh,
was the most entertaining part of the film, I say. I agree with that.
yeah,
Like that was kind of his storyline with the pod was very funny in many ways, but like it was an interesting thing of showing like how Amelia Clark's character doesn't really, and they
yeah,
bring it up at some point being like, she's like I'm the mom, I should be more, but then it kind of I suppose raises the idea of that maybe the pod thing isn't so bad because then the men actually get a chance to
hmm
quote unquote carry a baby, which at present day that
yeah.
cannot be. So
And we haven't even
um,
talked about uh, um, what's her name, the woman who's like the representative from the pod company who just delivers all this like
Rosalie Craig.
yeah, she just delivers all of this like
She's so
dystopian nightmare dialogue in such like a
I
matter of
found
fact, pleasant
she's
like
so
marketing safe
funny. Yeah.
way.
I found her
Like
to be just so funny in that like she was so shrewd and so ridiculous, but I found her very like yeah. The performances in this movie are really good actually. They're all really, really good. See again,
yeah,
that's the frustrating thing about this movie is that it does have all the pieces there to make a great movie and all they kind of came up with was a fine movie. Not
yeah.
even a good
It's
movie, I would say. It's just a fine movie.
although it is an award winner. It won
Yeah, yeah,
the Alfred P. Sloan Feature Film Prize, which is the one that it's awarded to films for their scientific veracity, I believe, so or plausibility. It is definitely that, and I didn't really connect with it in the way that I would hope, but I still
yeah.
think it's definitely a see it for yourself movie. Like I'm always on team see it for yourself, but this one in particular, like you should definitely see it for yourself.
It's a very good, like, kind of lazy Saturday movie to put on. You're just like, oh, this is something to put on. Which I don't know if that's a great characterization for a movie, but like to me, it's just one of those that yeah, if it's on a streaming service, it's perfect for that.
Yeah, and it probably
I
will
don't.
be. I think it's
It
still
will be,
shopping for
yeah.
distribution, but it'll definitely end up on a streamer.
I could
Yeah,
see it on Apple, but it might not be good enough for Apple.
yeah, it might be sort of outside their what they go for. Feels more like a I mean, I'm in Canada, so it's difficult to say with all the streaming services in the States, but it feels more like a movie type thing to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, movie
Interesting.
or maybe Hulu, one of those. Uh, it's hard to say because those are kind of all like there's fewer up here because they're sort of consolidated a
Yeah.
little more.
I would bet on Prime. That's the game we should play. Who's what streaming service is going to pick up this movie? We can revisit this at the end of the year.
Yeah,
I'll put my money on Prime to pick up this one. I'd say
yeah,
Prime
fair enough.
is
It would fit
gotta
there
be.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, well, let's move on. Let's talk about um I know that we both saw this one, but I don't know if you liked it or not. Let's talk about Eileen.
Okay.
Uh, Eileen is the story of a young woman who lives in I believe it's the 60s or
Yeah.
late
60s.
50s,
60s New England.
New England, and near Boston.
Austin,
She lives with her
Mohammed.
father, her drunk, abusive father, and she works at a prison, and she lives a fairly unremarkable life. Um, she's very socially awkward, very introverted, doesn't really know how to interact with people at all. And then one day, a new psychologist is hired at the prison, played by Anne Hathaway,
A
who, with
gorgeous looking Anne Hathaway. She's
gorgeous
amazing.
looking platinum blonde Anne
Yeah.
Hathaway, who's super outgoing and immediately gravitates towards Eileen. Just I think as like the only other young woman in the prison. Eileen is played by Thomasin McKenzie, of Last Night in Soho and um, Jojo Rabbit. Um, and I liked this movie. I don't know how you felt about it, but I didn't love it, but I did like it. And the first like 2/3 of the movie, like it's I don't think it's a spoiler to say there's a huge twist. The first part of the movie spends a lot of time making you think it's going to be one thing, and then it turns out to
Mhm.
be another. And the twist might be jarring for some, but I was as soon as the twist happened, that's actually when I got way more interested in the film, because it felt like a how to explain this without spoilers, but I mean, there's some romantic sexual tension between the two lead characters, and it's the whole first, yeah, basically 2/3 of the movie is exploring that, and it feels like a lesser, maybe not lesser, but it doesn't feel like a fresh version of that in any way. Like it's maybe a lesser Carol would be the way to put it. Um, like it's definitely something you've seen before, but then there's a twist, and it becomes a whole different movie, and it gets a lot more interesting. And I think that it's definitely worth seeking out. I don't know. How did you feel about this movie, Rachel?
So one, I think Anne Hathaway is wonderful in this movie. I think she's
Oh yeah, fully.
somehow has become a bit of an underrated actress. I don't know what happened. I kind of feel like people just kind of jumped off with her and weren't as big a fan, but I'm like, she's phenomenal in
Hmm.
this. I think it's a gorgeously made movie. It looks beautiful. I love seeing, I know this is like a very pretentious cinema thing to say, but like, when you see like the grain on the screen kind of swimming around and things like that, I love that. And it fits in with the 60s aesthetic really nicely. And they
Yeah,
do 60s New England wonderful as well. Like it's a nice looking movie. Um and I like the twist. I'm with you. I like the twist cuz I thought the movie was going to be uh I actually did think it was going to be like kind of a queer film about a young girl who's just trying to figure out who she is and what she likes, what she doesn't like and things like that. And Anne Hathaway is the very sophisticated, woman of the world who comes in and kind of turns her world upside down. I
and,
thought
and to be clear, it's not that.
it's yeah, it's not that. It is about that still. But it turns and it becomes something different. And I agree with you. That is when I kind of perked up and went, "Oh, this is awesome. I'm super excited about this. This is great." But then my problem with it is I check because I've obviously watched this at home. I checked and it's like, oh, there's like 25 minutes left in the movie.
Yeah,
And I'm like, so the thing that made me so interested and made me be like, oh, this is going places now. Just as it happens, then the movie's done. And that's kind of what bothered me. Now maybe what happens is if they strung it out a little bit longer, then maybe that doesn't maybe the impact loses it. Maybe I don't know. Like maybe if they had paced it out differently, it wouldn't have felt the same way. But it just bothered me that I was like the most interesting thing in this movie happens and then literally within 20 minutes the movie's done.
yeah.
And like
There's
that was frustrating to me.
there's definitely a change of pace at that point. Like it
Mhm.
becomes the first like two acts of the movie. The pace is very deliberate,
Slow.
almost
Yeah.
almost like languid, you might say. Like very.
But not in a bad way, I would say, not in a bad way, like, it fits the movie quite well to be that slow burn, like, I do think it
Yeah,
does.
yeah. But then it switches from being this like
Yeah.
deliberately paced, wonderfully atmospheric slow burn into being a much faster paced, still deliberately atmospheric or delightfully
Mhm.
atmospheric, different kind of movie. And you're right, it does end very quickly after that
Yeah.
point. I'm
It's
not
just annoying,
sure.
like, that really frustrates me.
The thing is that I'm not sure that it would work if they stretched it out because
Yeah,
like it's hard to explain without going into spoilers. But the first like 2 acts of the film take place over a fairly long, several days at least,
yeah,
stretch of time, and the last act takes place over basically one evening. So
yeah.
there is a difference in the amount of time being covered as well. I'm not sure that the actual ending, like the last couple, like shot especially, um, would have the same impact if it was any longer. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a
yeah,
difficult line to
I'm
walk
with you
there.
there.
But yeah,
I'm
it's
just
it
asking for, like, 10 minutes more, 15
yeah.
minutes more, like, just a little bit more because it just felt not I don't wanna go as far as saying it felt tacked on because I don't think it felt tacked on, but
It
it's
just
based on
feels
a
like a
book.
different
It's
it
based on a
just
book,
feels like
and
a different movie.
I'm very curious to read the book and how the book plays it out. Like, I'm very, very curious how that works because and the other again, without giving anything away, I'm very interested in Anne Hathaway's character in this more than anything else, and we don't get too many and I was thinking about that watching the film was like, we don't get too many glimpses of her too much. We don't really understand her
Yeah.
background, her motivations that much. But I also think the reason for that is, or sorry, the reason that I'm so intrigued by her is probably because we're not getting enough information about her. So in that sense, like as much as I'm like I wanted to see more of Anne Hathaway's character, I it's the same thing with the with the plot twist. It's like I get that it built this idea of like we wanted to see more, which is always a better feeling to come away from a movie from than that was a slog and that was just too much. Like it's always better
Yeah.
to be like, oh, I wish there was more, like because you just want more of it. But yeah, those are the things. So I'm. It's for the. I think this might be the first time that I've ever watched a movie and that I hadn't already read the book, and I went, I actually really want to read the book because I don't normally
Oh.
do that to be honest. So yeah, but this one I'm curious how the book works because it's a very interesting story.
Yeah. I think to your point about Anne Hathaway's character, I think you're right. I think she's so intriguing because we don't really know that much about her.
Yeah,
And I think that's also kind of part of the point because the film is 100% from Eileen's
yeah.
point of view, from Thomas and Mackenzie's point of view, and she doesn't ever like. It's not a spoiler to say that at no point in this movie does she truly understand who Anne Hathaway
Hmm.
is either.
Yeah.
So we're really working with Eileen's, um, you know,
POV. Yeah.
yeah, point of view, her wants, her assumptions about what's going on, and so in that way, I think that leaving Anne Hathaway's character a bit of a mystery kind of serves
It
the
works. Yeah,
narrative.
it works.
Um, but yeah, I mean,
Also, Anne Hathaway, Platinum Blonde. It made me be like, why haven't we given her the shot to play Marilyn Monroe?
I
She
mean,
looked
yeah.
great.
I mean, Anne
She looked
Hathaway
great.
is one of those people. You were talking about how like people sort of jumped off the bandwagon. I don't think that that's exactly true. My experience when speaking with people about Anne Hathaway is that they think that she's either wonderful or they intensely dislike her. And
Yeah,
I'm
what's
working
up
with
with that
and
though?
I'm
Why
I'm
do
working
people
with a fairly
dislike?
small sample size, but I know at least two people in my like broader circle of like friends and family. Most people are like, yeah, Anne Hathaway, she's a great actress. And there's like two people in particular who are like, fuck that bitch, I hate her. And like,
Do you know what
and
I
like,
think it's the
I don't
Les
get it.
Mis thing. I think it was the Les Mis thing. I think when she was going through
And
Academy Award, because she was winning everything, a
in
lot
at
of people
least
were
one
going off on
case,
her.
in at least one case, it goes way further back than that.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, well
and it
then I
just
don't understand that. Like
and just
she's
says like,
great.
and I think what it is I think that this person in particular, and like no shade, like we all react to people differently, but I think this person has always felt that Anne Hathaway has in real life presented herself in a way that rubs this person the wrong way. Basically,
Some
like
people think she's snobby. I've heard that. Like some people think that she comes off as being a bit of a snob, and I'm like, she like to me the thing I like about Anne Hathaway is like she literally minds her own business, does her great movies, does great performances, and then pieces out and goes home. That's it.
yeah,
Like she
I
doesn't
think
do anything, and I'm like,
I think a
what's
better
wrong with
word is
that?
that I think that some people might think she comes off as a bit smug because she's also not shy
Yeah,
about being like, I'm good. I'm really good at this. I'm a great actress. You
yeah.
know, like
Hey,
whereas we very much expect, you
yeah, we
know,
like humility, don't we? As a society, we like
we
humility.
like humility and again not to like call anyone out, but like especially in women.
Yeah,
You
Yeah,
know,
that's true. Yeah.
it's totally fine for the Leonardo DiCaprios of the world to get up and be like, "I'm the best," but it's not ever really fine for the Anne Hathaways of the world to do the same thing.
I would
And
also say, like, it's such a huge compliment when we can say, like, a man is humble. We're like, "Oh my god, just so much humility and so humble." But we don't necessarily attribute that to women that often because we just kind of expect women to be humble and
yeah,
whatever. Whereas men, you're just like, "Man, so humble. So,
yeah.
so humble."
Look at all of his accomplishments. Yeah. This is why total side note, this is why I thought that the song I'm So Humble was robbed at the Academy Awards the year that it came out with Pop
I
Star. I
don't
don't know
even
if you
know
ever.
that song.
Oh, you never saw the movie Pop Star? Never Stop, Never Stopping?
Oh, yeah, I did. There was
Yeah.
this.
It's the first song of the whole movie called I'm So
Oh,
Humble, sung by
I
Andy
haven't seen that
Samberg,
in a
and
really long time.
it's all about how humble he is, and like a it is both a perfect parody of a pop song and a perfect pop song.
That movie is egregiously underrated. It's a
Yeah.
great movie.
True
Yeah.
story. That movie is the most logged movie in my letterboxd, like by a fairly wide margin.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
so funny.
because
I
in
love the
addition,
title too. It's a great, like an amazing movie title. Just the best movie title ever.
yeah. But the thing about that movie, not to get too far off topic, the thing about that movie is that not only is it really good-hearted and really funny, it's also a super tight, like 89 minutes. Like it's super easy to
Yeah,
just watch.
because Andy Samberg gets it. He
Yeah,
knows. We don't want to sit there for 2 hours watching
yeah. All the Lonely Island
goofs.
guys get it.
Come on now. Yeah.
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 Anyway, so that's very much like Eileen, but so, but yeah, it's a good movie. I don't know where it's going to land, but when it does come out, Eileen, I think is definitely one worth seeking out. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's move on. Let's talk about
Oh wait,
one.
hold on. You said you don't know where it's gonna land. Any guesses where you think the movie's gonna land?
Honestly,
Let's really dive into this game.
it feels like a Netflix one to me. It feels like a Netflix one.
I'm gonna go and say, you think a streamer's gonna take it? I actually think it might go to like a studio, a proper
I mean,
studio.
it might go limited release. It might go to like an A24 or a Neon of the world.
I'm gonna go with it goes to Searchlight and then they do limited and then it flops over to Disney Plus slash Hulu. That's my guess on that.
Yeah, that's plausible too. I feel like the movie itself has a very A24 feel about it. So it could
Yeah,
also
it
do
does.
like
Yeah.
it could also go the A24 and then straight to Apple route because A24 has a
But
deal
I
with
think it's
Apple.
like an A24 early A24. To me, it
Hmm.
reminds me of like an early A24 movie versus what they kind of do now because they don't really do this type of movie anymore.
Well, maybe
But
it's a Neon then. Maybe it's like a Neon
maybe, yeah,
and then in Canada instead of being A24 and Elevation, it's like Neon and VBS.
yeah.
You know.
Okay, great. We've got that one down.
Yeah.
That's our
Good.
prediction for that.
Right. So let's talk now. Let's talk about the one that you have seen, and I am literally
Mhm.
like it is in the next room, paused because I had to come and record.
Are you gonna get timed out by it? I didn't
I
think about that.
don't.
I didn't.
I don't think so. We've been talking for
Okay.
an. I watched an hour and
Yeah, but we were
change.
talking for like 30 minutes before this.
It's
Okay,
a
we should
five
wrap
hour.
this up then so you can
It's
finish it.
it's a 5 hour window, so I think I'm still. I
Yeah.
think I still have like
Okay.
2 hours to go.
Cool.
But yeah, let's talk about Magazine Dreams. And since you have seen all of it and I have seen most of it, why don't you tell me about Magazine Dreams?
Sure. So Magazine Dreams is effectively it's a Jonathan Majors vehicle, and he plays a amateur bodybuilder who is for better like I don't want to throw the word autistic or anything like that around, but like he is socially very awkward.
Hmm.
He doesn't read social cues. He doesn't really but the thing to me is interesting is he knows that he doesn't read social cues. So I find that kind of like he's aware that he's a bit awkward and that and because he is so physically imposing as well and it's I get the feeling that he kind of knows that about himself. He's also in court mandated therapy with a wonderful what's her name? I need her name because I really like her. Harriet Sansom Harris, who, for any
Hmm.
Frasier fans out there, it's BB. It's BB from Frasier. It plays his agent, but she's in such a small role, but she is actually incredible in that movie, and it's yeah. So it follows Jonathan Major's character, which is Killian Maddox, who goes around and is working part time at a grocery store. He tries to court one of the his coworkers there who he thinks she's cute, and he's again, like, he's a sweet man. You can see that he's a sweet guy, but he also takes a lot of steroids to help with his bodybuilding, and makes him prone to some violent outbursts and being quite sensitive in that respect. He also has an obsession with another bodybuilder. In the movie, it's called Brad Vanderhorn, played by Mike O'Hearn, and is someone who's his idol, and he just like writes letters to this guy trying to tell him what's going on with his stuff, and with his amateur bodybuilding career, and what's he working on, ask him questions, and of course Brad doesn't ever respond.
Oh, of course.
Well, of course. And yeah, so it's an interesting movie to say that it's a slice of life movie, because not anything particularly big happens. Actually, I shouldn't say that. So, like, stuff does happen in it, but there's not one kind of overarching story that we're looking at. It's just a bit of this guy, Killian Maddox. It's looking at his life. And the biggest takeaway from this movie is number one, or the two biggest takeaways from this is number one, it's a very, very intense movie that I think most people are going to feel the same thing that I felt when you come out of it, which is you don't really know what you feel, like if you like the movie or not. All you know that it was an incredibly intense film. Like, it's very, very intense,
Hmm.
which to me it should be, because it's a film that is all about the extremes of masculinity and the way that we think about them. And I think the perfect word to describe that is probably intense. But the second takeaway, which is the biggest takeaway, is Jonathan Majors is an incredible actor, and
Yeah, he really
this
is.
he's phenomenal. And we were talking about this. I don't think were recording when we talked about this, but he's about to have an amazing year. Like, he's going to be in Creed 3. He's got his Marvel movie. I can't remember which Marvel movie. Ant-Man? Is he going to be an Ant-Man? Is that what it is?
So he's actually signed up to be Kang the Conqueror, like for
Right.
Marvel, but he's going to be the primary antagonist in Ant Man and the Wasp:
Right.
Quantumania. But he's already been in Loki, and
Right,
he's
yeah.
the thing about Kang is
Phenomenal.
that like we're going to get multiple versions of him. So not only are we going to get
Oh, okay.
Jonathan Majors in lots of Marvel movies, we're going to get Jonathan Majors playing effectively a different character in every Marvel movie he's in, which
Well,
I
I'm
think is
into that.
fascinating.
Very into that. Yeah, this is going to be a really good year for him, because I think all three of those movies are going to do him well in different ways, and this will definitely be the one that, if he is going to get into kind of awards talk, it'll probably be for this movie, because his performance is outstanding, like really, really outstanding. And yeah, I can't say enough about his performance. In terms of the actual movie, I'm a little lukewarm on it, if I'm honest. Like, I like it, I didn't love it, um but I also don't really know how I feel about it either. Like, I think that I don't know clearly how I feel about it. Like, I know that it's not a bad movie for sure, and I would recommend anybody go and watch it, because I do think he is incredible enough that it's well worth a ticket sale.
Yeah. Again, I'm not done watching this movie, but what I have seen, I would say, makes it definitely 100% worthwhile watching. It also has a very good supporting cast. You already mentioned Harriet Sampson Harris, who,
BB,
yes, BB. Also,
BB Bennett.
for everyone who is a Marvel nerd, she was in Werewolf by Night at Halloween last year,
Oh, right,
and
yeah,
she was fucking great in that.
she's great.
And
She's
she's
great.
wonderful here. You're right; her part is super small, but she's
She's so good.
so well realized and so well performed. It doesn't matter. I think Haley Bennett shows up in this as a bit of a
Yeah,
love interest for
yeah.
Killian. Um,
She's plays the grocery store, one of his coworkers at the grocery store who he tries to date, and she's very good
yeah,
in it as
and
well.
she's
And
I would say
Taylor
like
Page is someone who, I don't know if you've gotten there yet.
yes, I'm to that
You have?
point.
Okay.
So yeah, Taylor Page plays a prostitute. Um, but I was going to say that Haley Bennett, who I interestingly I haven't really been that on board with Haley Bennett that much. Like I sort of like I get it, but I also been like she's sort of fine, and people have been raving about her in a way where I've been like, okay, sure. Um, but this is a movie where I'm like, oh, Haley Bennett, yeah, okay, I get it now.
You get it. You get it. Yeah.
There's a scene that when they go on a date, there's a scene where he's speaking and she's just reacting, which might be the best like 4 minutes of acting I saw at the whole festival.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just all body language and facial expressions the way she's getting progressively more
Uncomfortable.
uncomfortable and realize the situation she's put herself in, and it's all done non-verbally, and it is
Yeah,
she's
she's
so
great.
good. um and I, I get it now. I get it now. I think like I think all the acting in this movie is phenomenal so far.
It's honestly, I would say it's a very well done movie, like from start to finish, and it's well written, it's well performed, it's well produced. Like, I think it's just
It is
it
intense though.
feel
The word is
it's
intense. You're
super intense. Like, it's a very intense movie to the point that I do think just you come away from it being like, what the hell did I just watch? Because
yeah.
like I said, it feels like not a lot happens in it, but a lot happens in it, and when it does happen, it happens intensely.
Yes.
It's an interesting movie, and I think it will do quite well. Like, I actually can see it being for majors. It could definitely be an awards contender later on.
Yeah, I think if the production companies play their cards right, I think you could definitely be right. This could be, and you're right. He's going to have a great year, not just because he's in three good movies, but because he's in. And we talked about this a little bit before, but like he's in three movies that capture like all the demographics. Like
Yeah.
he's gaining, he's got the Marvel movie, he's got the prestige drama, and he's got the indie cred with this one. Um, and I'm sure he's great in all three, but I really hope this one gets some play because he's so good. He's just so good. But
Where
if
do
you
you
want to
think this
see
movie ends up?
and if you're into really muscly men, then also just watch this movie because he
Yeah,
is.
but it's not muscly to where it's attractive, if I'm quite honest. As a lady, I'm just gonna say, when you get that muscly, it's just not. It's not. What is that?
I don't know.
It's not is the answer.
I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, a lot of the times this whole muscly thing is more about the male gaze than the female. But
It's very true.
he's an attractive man, is all I'm trying to say.
He has a really great scene when he is doing the bodybuilding, and like they're doing, I suppose it's a competition, and they're um that would be the word for it, right? Yeah, when they're
Yeah.
competing and the judge is calling out, different poses that they're meant to be doing,
Hmm.
and because they're all standing quite close to each other and they're kind of like bumping each other a little bit, and they're like, smile, they're do this, do that. Jonathan Majors is just a beast doing those, and just like
Yeah.
it's incredible watching him do it. It's so uncomfortable seeing that, and because you're just like, at any minute it's about to pop off, and it's just like he's so annoyed by the guy bumping into him next to him. It looks like they're about to throw down, but then he is just intense. Like, intense
Yeah.
is just the only word that I can really attribute to this movie. It's
Yeah. And
incredible
even
though. Yeah, he's incredible.
yeah, and even in the scene like immediately before that one, because in the competition, he's just intent again. Intense is the word.
Yeah.
We need a thesaurus, but intense is the word. But there's right before that he practices his smile in the mirror,
Yeah.
and like it is
Yeah.
like it's an upsetting moment. Like the
Upsetting is a good word. Yeah, it's very
like
upsetting.
there's no I can't think of another word to describe the way
It's
he
very
looks when
upsetting.
he's. It looks like he's an alien trying to approximate what a human
Yeah.
smiling would look like, and it is just
Yeah,
upsetting because
it's just yeah,
he's so like introverted. He's so like turned in on himself. He's clearly suffering from some emotional trauma,
yeah, yeah,
um, and just like and then he's like on all these steroids and other
yeah,
things that are just like screwing him up.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, again, intense would be the word.
Yeah. And I know sometimes people get a bit put off by being like, "Oh, it's a movie exploring toxic masculinity and this and that." Like, and I know that doesn't do it for a lot of people, especially, because these kind of trendy buzzwords have taken a life of their own these days. But it's a really good just look at, the most extreme of what we kind of have traditionally seen as being masculine, which is typically in a physical form.
Yeah,
And so you see it in, a bodybuilder who's not a professional bodybuilder by any means. Like, he is still just locally performing and competing. But it's such an interesting look at that. Actually, the more I talk to you about it, the more I'm realizing I do quite like it. I do quite like the movie.
yeah. I mean,
So yeah,
it's very good. It's very good.
it is a very good movie. It's a very well done movie. Um, where who do you think's gonna pick this one up? I'm actually surprised it's not picked up, or has it been? Because I'm shocked it's
I
not.
I don't know, but I get the I get the distinct feeling this is, given who's in it, given that Jonathan Majors is in it, and his profile for like last year and this year, I think this is probably one of the ones that we don't know who's picked it up because there's some kind of behind the scenes bidding war happening right now, especially as it won a
I think
Sundance
so.
Award. Which one did it win? It won one of the dramatic competition audience awards, didn't it? Special. So it won
Oh
the
yeah, you're
dramatic
right. You're right.
special jury award for creative vision. Um,
Yeah.
so like, I get the feeling there's a bidding war for this one, or there
I
will be
think
if
it's
there's
going
an
to
argument.
I think it's going to go to a big company, like a big studio, like a Lionsgate or a Universal or something like that. Like it's going to go
Yeah,
somewhere
I
quite
I
large.
think I think it's probably going to get an art house. I don't know if it would play in a wide release kind of way, but it's definitely going to get an art house awards run.
I think though, if they can time it right and do it after Creed comes out, after, well, it will be after Creed and after
Well, yeah, 'cause Ant-Man's
because
like 2 weeks
those
away.
are, yeah, Ant-Man's coming up and then Creed is in March. So if you can play it right and be like capitalize off the fact that people are going to be talking about him and just in terms of popularity, then put this in. That actually could work out quite nicely for them, whoever picks it up.
Yeah, I get the feeling. Excuse me, I get the feeling that like it might come out in the fall when all the other awards
Which
bait
might be
comes
too
out.
late then, because then, like, because this is all like earlier stuff, but then just for the fact that we haven't heard anything, like, it would be very quick. Like we were saying about Infinity Pool, like that came out really fast. But that's obviously because it didn't matter about Sundance. I think the movie was always coming out in end of Jan.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think it could work out well. I think like maybe they could get more box office receipts than they expect because I think he's just gonna have an incredible year where everyone's just gonna want to see. Oh, there's a new Jonathan Major movie. Yeah, okay, let's go check it out, kind of thing. So
hmm
it could do well.
and yeah, I hope so. I hope that whoever picks it up treats it right. Basically,
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
plays the game. It's the kind of movie that I think if whoever's in charge of this plays the game correctly, yeah, it could make a big splash. Especially at things like, I don't know what the budget is, so I don't know if it would qualify, but at
Mm,
things like Indie Spirits, Gotham Awards, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, uh, and
they don't
from
say.
there, the larger awards circuit as well.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
Yeah. So yeah, another one to keep an eye out for. And I think that will bring us to our last film we're going to talk about, which is Infinity Pool. And what to say about this movie? So we've both seen Infinity Pool now,
We should
and
be
it.
clear that we saw the version that's. I assume you saw the version Sundance, not the you didn't go to the screening for it in Canada.
I saw the version that Elevation Pictures sent to me in Canada.
Ah,
So are there
okay. We can talk
differences?
about. Yeah, I'll ask you later. But yes, so it was actually kind of interesting. I read an interview with Brandon Cronenberg and Barry Hertz at Golden Globes, Globe and Mail, at
Uh
the
huh.
Globe and Mail, and they were talking about how so Sundance audiences basically got the full, what they would call an NC-17, but just like the full kind of version. Canadian cinemas, though, they had to get an R rating cut. So there's one specific scene that didn't make it into the Canadian cinemas, but it will be on home release in Canada.
Uh, I can think of a couple of scenes that would need to be cut from the version I saw to make it an R.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I'm curious what you saw, because if you saw a link that's a little bit different, then yeah, I'm curious. Anyways,
Yeah, I
continue.
missed, I so that one I missed the window. Like, it was one of the ones where when I was booking the movies I wanted to see,
Hmm.
I actually didn't immediately go for it because I knew it was going to be coming out, and I thought we might cover it on the podcast. But then
Which is
someone on
silly though, isn't it? But that's I
someone on the podcast, I suggested it, and someone else on the podcast was like, "Hard pass. I'm not doing another body horror thing."
Well,
and
as a
that
member of this team now, I can
and
obviously say
that
what's
person
happening.
will remain unnamed for, to preserve their anonymity. Um, so at that point, it was too late to get tickets. So I just contacted our local rep and was like, "Hey, can I watch this movie, please?" And they were like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, sure." Um, but basically, um, Infinity Pool stars Alexander Skarsgård as a man who basically a failed writer who's on vacation with his rich spouse or his rich wife at this uber luxury resort in a fictional Central American country, I think.
They don't really actually say. They
They don't
just
really
say
say, and I know it was
they just say
filmed
it's
in,
foreign. They're just like, it's
yeah,
a foreign island.
it's filmed in Croatia, but everyone has Hispanic names and speaks Spanish, so who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but basically, they meet another couple, the woman of which is played by Mia Goth, and they get into some trouble. And it turns out, like it's hard to speak. It's hard to speak about this
No,
movie
I
without.
think this is fine because like this is all in
This is all the
like
setup,
this is
yeah.
yeah, like this is part of the
So
synopsis and things like that.
so yeah, they get into trouble, and on the way back from an excursion, they hit a local man, and it turns out
Mm-hmm.
and kill him. And it turns out that in the local justice system, if you kill someone, the punishment is that that person's firstborn son can kill you back, which is just super interesting. But then it also turns out that if you are rich enough, you can pay to have a clone made, and then the firstborn son can kill the shit out of that clone.
Mm-hmm.
And
But on the condition that you have to watch your
yeah, but
clone be executed.
on the condition that you must witness, and um, it goes places after that.
I there's a
Like,
podcast I listen to. I don't listen to many podcasts, but like there's one that I listen to. It's about three American film critics, and the plot, literally as you just described it, got described to him, and he's just like, "What the like? What
yeah,
kind of a premise is that?"
I'll tell you what kind of a premise it is. It's a super interesting one.
It is, yeah.
It's a super interesting idea because the rest of the movie is basically. It turns out that although Alexander Skarsgård is only there for the first time, that Mia Goth and her whole cadre of friends come every year specifically to do crimes, do heinous crimes, and then watch their doubles get murdered. And they basically want to like indoctrinate him. Um, and so they do things. They do things, and it goes places.
They do lots of things,
They
yes.
do lots and lots and lots of things. It's not the it's not exactly the body horror that I think that
No, yeah.
unnamed person was worried it was going to be, but it is definitely a fucked up movie. Like,
It's yeah, it's I want to say also Amanda Brugel is in it, who's a fantastic Canadian actress, and
yeah,
I love like seeing her pop up and stuff.
yeah, it's interesting because Brandon Cronenberg, obviously son
Mm-hmm.
of David Cronenberg and Canadian. There's actually most of the people in this. It's basically like Mia Goth is English and Alexander Skarsgård is Swedish, and basically everyone else is Canadian, which is
Yeah,
kind of great.
good on
But yeah,
them.
I was going to say I will never quite look at Amanda Brugel the same way again.
No.
Or really anyone in the movie though. Like it's already a thing that Mia Goth is the reigning queen of horror, and it's already a thing that Alexander Skarsgård will do just about anything on camera.
Anything. That
But it
man,
was
it just seems to me you ask him to do something, he'll be like, yes. And like, did you see the publicity photos when like they had the dog collar and he just was like, yeah, and he put it on and just got down on all fours and Mia Goth and like they're just
and yeah,
standing
she like
in a
and then
press
she
line. Like they're just
yeah
taking their picture. I was like, damn.
yeah
Good for him.
yeah. So they're both between them. They're both some of
Game
the
for anything, the two.
yeah game for anything. Some of the most adventurous performers there is, and
Very much so.
but like no, there. I've seen some of the other people in this movie before, but I will never look at any of them the same way again. And because some of the scenes are pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you what my favorite scene is, just because it would be a pretty major spoiler. But everyone is game for what's going on, and it's shot in such an interesting, weird, psychedelic way. I would honestly say it's definitely worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little a little shallow in terms of the like social commentary that it's going for. Like it's definitely maxed out on the weirdness and I don't want to say gore. Gore's the wrong word, but just like it definitely
Gross.
goes.
Gross.
Yeah, it definitely goes further into certain things than you would expect it to. Except for the most probably the most important part, which would be the like the social satire, the social commentary that it's trying to
Yeah.
say. Not that it doesn't say anything, just that like it's the thinnest version of what it's trying to say, unfortunately. But that doesn't make it a bad movie. It just means that
No.
like it's not a truly great movie either. But it is a good movie, and it is interesting and weird and fucked up. And I never saw Possessor, but this is a much better made movie than Antiviral, which, for the record, I liked.
Yeah.
But he can definitely tell that he's progressing. Brandon Cronenberg is progressing as a filmmaker.
So I'll say a few things. Firstly, what you said about the kind of how shallow and superficial the themes, kind of the way he explores
Yeah.
themes. Just gonna plug my own review here at Exclaim. But I basically had written in there that, and I was quite proud of it. I was like, this is a great little line that I threw into my review. But I basically had written that it's like he gets a lot of hits. Like he nails each hit, and it's like a single every time, but he never hits a home run with any of them. Like he
Yeah.
never actually lands what something is about. And there are some fascinating themes throughout the whole movie, but he just doesn't go for it that much, which is fine. Like that's kind of, maybe that's not the point, but it is kind of the point of the movie. But for me, that kind of took away a bit of what you could go from, like you said, a good movie to a great movie. Like if they had just kind of pushed that a little bit more. Um, and then what was I gonna say? Oh, one thing that I found was interesting was a lot of people are painting it as like a Skewer the Rich kind of movie, similar to Triangle of Sadness, The Menu, Glass Onion, because we've been getting a lot of that lately. White Lotus is another one that like everyone's talking about that, but to me, it's not about rich. It's not. I mean, it is in the sense that you need to be rich in order to access this thing. But to
Yeah.
me, what the film was more about was about like, what would you do if you were faced with no consequences? Like where's your morality at when you can literally do whatever it is that you want free from consequence? Like you have your literal get out of free jail, no, get out of jail free card. Like you literally have that card to play. What would you do in the face of that? And that to me was the most interesting question that the movie raises. And they do show it, and it's quite good. But yeah, I found the movie, I'm with you, like I think it's a good movie. It's not a great movie. I think it's his Brandon Cronenberg's nicest looking movie. Not necessarily like, because stuff is gross, but
I mean, it's
I just think
gorgeously shot though.
it's
Like it's
gorgeously shot. It's so beautifully shot, and like you said, it shows like a real progression from him as a filmmaker, from Antiviral to Possessor to this film. And I think it's a really lovely, actually, journey through his portfolio, or whatever you want to call it.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it's probably his most gorgeously shot film, and so I like seeing that. Like I like seeing this filmmaker who's, I'd say he's still young. Like I think he still has many years ahead of him to make movies. But it's definitely, each movie he makes, I think, gets better. Even though I know some people have been saying like they think Possessor's a better movie than this one. I've been trying to stop doing those comparisons amongst like a director's films, because I'm just like, it's a different movie. So I don't know if it's how fair it is to compare, but I think technically speaking, I do think this one's probably his best one.
I mean, I think all again. I haven't seen Possessor, but so of the two Brandon Cronenberg films that I have seen, like
Mm-hmm.
there's no small swing. Like he's never shooting for a single. Like he's always swinging for the
Yeah.
fences.
Yeah.
So, and I think that there's value in that, whether he succeeds or not.
I'm glad
So
my
I since
baseball analogy is continuing on here. That's great.
I mean anytime you want to bring up baseball is totally fine. Especially if Simon's around because he has a deep understanding of that game. Just for the record, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's value in we need artists who are always taking the big swings, right?
Yeah, very true.
It's totally fine to have and I'm a big proponent of movies that are comfortable and easy and are a fine Saturday afternoon type of movie, like The Pod Generation, which I feel really is like at best swinging for a double, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
they're just happy
it's
to be on base. They're just
yeah,
happy to be on
exactly.
base.
Whereas this, like, I don't think it succeeds, but like I think he's taken a big swing, and I think that
Yeah,
has value.
I don't think anybody could ever accuse Brandon Cronenberg of not being an ambitious filmmaker. Like he's and he's got confidence in the way that he approaches his stuff too. Like I think you can see it. Like he's got a lot of commitment to the cause of what he's gonna do and how he's gonna put it out there. I really like him as a filmmaker. I think he's done a good job of, while following his father in a similar genre, I think he's done a good job of making a very distinct kind of section of quote unquote body horror. But like you said, this film doesn't have any. I
Not
shouldn't say it doesn't have
really.
any, but it's not really a body horror movie. It
No,
is
I
in the
mean,
sense of the doubling and that kind of thing. Like you can consider that maybe body horror ish, but it's
I
not
mean, yeah,
really a body horror movie.
the camera doesn't like ever pull away from people being killed, but
Yeah. But
it's
that's
not
not body horror
it's
though, is
not
it?
body horror, right?
No,
It's
yeah.
it's not like purposeful mutilation or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the camera never looks away.
Yeah.
And
I
even when
wonder
it
if,
and in the
you know,
few times where it does look away, it's like it's drenched in this psychedelic
yeah.
haze and multiple overlapping pictures where like you didn't really want it to look away. You know what I mean? Like
It's
it's
true. Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if we just kind of keep putting I mean, Possessor is very firmly a body horror movie, and Antiviral is too, I'd say. But like, I wonder if we just kind of assume that everything he does is going to be body horror because of, well, his other movies, but also because of what his
Yeah, I
last name
mean,
is.
and that's not even fair because I think
Yeah.
many of David Cronenberg's best films aren't.
Yeah.
You know, it's
He did. I mean, he stopped doing body horror movies. Like he went what 20 some odd years not doing a body horror movie. Like Crimes of the Future. What Crimes of the Future?
yeah,
No,
Crimes of
what
the
was that
Future
movie?
this year, yeah,
Crimes
last
of the
year.
Future. Thank you. Yeah, that was his first body horror movie in, yeah, I think 20 years.
In ages, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, he's
So
been guest starring on Star Trek, which has been great. And maybe we get Brandon as well. Um, but yeah, I think Infinity Pool is definitely worth seeking
worth
out.
watching.
Definitely
100%. Yeah.
worth
I mean,
watching.
it's
If
not going to be for everybody, but yeah, it's definitely worth seeking out.
yeah, I will say the one thing I'm actually legitimately worried about is I am sure that social media is going to be full of clips and memes of Mia Goth going, "James, you little baby man," like
I love the way she said Jamesy. Like, I could not get
yeah,
over that. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Because I'm like,
yeah,
your voice is so effing annoying, but I'm like, but please don't stop. Like, this is so funny. This is amazing. And I
yeah.
would say also, this is besides the point, but like, they really glammed her up in this movie. Like, she's quite glamorous looking.
Oh, she's stunning in this movie.
Absolutely stunning. And like, I love that though. I think she's got, yeah, we barely even talked about Mia Goth in this one, like, but she's an incredible actress, and I think like probably one of the more interesting actresses working today, I would say.
And honestly, at this point, I say this as someone who didn't really connect with X. I
Hmm.
loved Pearl, but I did not really connect with X.
Hmm.
But like, if I find her a little bit terrifying now after Suspiria and Pearl
Yeah,
and this. I think if I were to like see her in the street, I'd be like, "Ha, hey, you're a famous person and you're super beautiful, and I'm going to be over as far away that way as I can be
yeah.
because you are terrifying to me." Um,
Her eyes are very. I
yeah,
see something.
she has that same quality that Anya Taylor Joy does in that she's at all at once extremely beautiful, but has such a unique look that it's a little bit
They're
off
kind of
putting.
alien like. They're kind of alien like looking, I
Yeah,
think. In the
yeah.
back, and I would throw Robert Pattinson into that too, where they're very good looking people, but they're kind of alien looking.
I don't think Robert Pattinson's alien looking. He just has a
Oh,
face
I
like a
think
shovel.
he's I think he's such an alien looking man. Like he confuses me as to why I find him attractive, because I'm just like, why do I find you attractive? I don't get it.
It's because he doesn't care if you do or not. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's true. That is
Yeah.
true.
Anyway, well, that's Infinity War. And
Infinity War?
Infinity War. It is kind of Infinity War in a way. It's Infinity Pool. It's a very strange trilogy they're working on. It's all I'm saying. And yeah, I think that's where we're gonna wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we go?
No,
because this is already almost double our normal episode length, so we should probably wrap it up.
No, thanks for having me on, though.
No, thanks for being on again. You're just part of the team now. So that's what's happening. I think this is my first Sundance, and I had a good time covering it. And I know I've seen a lot of people talking about how it wasn't as good as Sundance as it's been in the past, but I watched mostly good movies, so I'm pretty happy. How about you?
Yeah, I kind of fall into that former camp where I wasn't, I don't know, I was struggling a bit to find things that I really loved. And even the movies that I've come away being like, I like them. I think there's only 3 that I saw that I was like, yeah, I genuinely really, really, really like these movies and would watch them again kind of thing. And yeah, there hadn't been that many. And this is only my second one, but my first Sundance last year's, I came away with like 2 movies that I was sure that I'm like, these are going to be some of my favorite movies of all time kind of thing.
Oh,
and
wow.
Sure enough, they continue to be. And then Fresh, which I apparently can't stop talking about today. But yeah, I found last year's, I just found more, I connected more to last year's lineup than what I did this year, which is a bit unfortunate, but
fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Just always next year. And it's not like last year's going to go away, so
it's true.
Yep. Anyway, well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much for being on the show, Rachel. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? You can all of my stuff is at rachelkh.com, and then on Twitter and Instagram at _RachelKH.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at SmatthewAF, and you can find the show on both things at AwesomeFridayCA. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. We would love it if you stuck around. And if you're not new here, thank you for sticking around. We love each and every one of you. If you would like to support us, feel free to consider to give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice or multiple podcasting platforms. I don't know, whatever. You do you. Or like, subscribe, tell your friends. And if you'd like to support us a little more directly, we do have a Patreon, and that'll be in the show notes. We record this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish peoples. And also,
I'm recording on the land within the jurisdiction of the Williams Treaties and on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples.
Excellent. And that is our show. Thank you for joining us on this special bonus episode of Awesome Friday on a Tuesday, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.